Hi everyone, Kate here for the first in another series. I know I'm doing lots of series lately, but this is what I've just been inspired about lately, so I figured I should just go with it, and hopefully there are some other people out there that find it interesting. But I wanted to tell you about a new project I will be doing, and I figured I would utilize this project for booktube videos. And so I did about a year ago a fairy tale adaptation tag about my favorite fairy tale, Cinderella. And I just kind of got thinking about all the different forms of Cinderella that are out there, all of the movies, all of the beautiful picture books, all of the chapter books, all of the just different art that's gone along with Cinderella. And so I'm going to be doing a huge project, which I shall be calling the Cinderella Chronicles, and which I am going to be trying out any and every movie, film adaptation of Cinderella, picture books of Cinderella, and then fairy tale retellings, so YA books, adult fiction, you know, anything and everything. I'm pretty much willing to try almost anything, no matter how ridiculous it is. And you will see in the upcoming videos kind of how ridiculous it can get, but I just can't wait to witness it. Before I do, start chronicling everything that I do read and watch, I do have 5 recommendations for you, and these are ones that I already really like based on Cinderella. And the first is KY Craft's Cinderella picture book. It just has the most beautiful, elaborate illustrations, very glitzy, and I really like it. Like, everything sparkles and shines in the pictures. I just think it's so beautiful and really worth anybody's time. KY Craft book is based from the Blue Fairy book by Andrew Lang. That's what the text is based on. So it's going to have, a little bit different of a flavor to it. One thing I did before, starting on this project is I watched, and I will link down below, Jen Campbell has a series on her channel called Fairy Tales with Jen, and she did an episode on Cinderella, and it was very interesting to hear the history. And I actually thought the first story of Cinderella was Chinese in origin, but it is in fact Egyptian, the very first one. So first there was an Egyptian one, a Chinese one, an Italian one, and then Charles Perrault was a Frenchman who made the version that we're probably the most familiar with today, that like the 1950s Disney cartoon is based on. So I really would recommend watching Jen's video. It was really interesting and just really neat to hear kind of how the story has evolved. And also, the Grimm's fairy tale is one that is a really more intense version of the story, with it ending with, spoiler alert, the stepsisters, one cutting off her toes to try to fit into the magic slipper, and the other cutting off her heels to try to fit into the slippers, and then in the end their eyes are pecked out by birds. So Disney definitely chose not to go with that darker interpretation. I do think it's really interesting to see the different ways that the stepsisters are dealt with in the end of the book, in the end of the story. One that I love is Ella Enchanted. This is one I've reread numerous times, and it's a really unique, special take on Cinderella. And I love when a retelling does that, when it can make something really unique. So you'll hear me in my reviews, that's something that I'm going to look for. Was this a unique retelling? Because I do think it's nice when they're like bread and butter versions, but also really neat. I kind of think retellings are really just folklore. Fairy tales are kind of folklore and just free to different people to interpret how they want to. So I really like that. And Ella Enchanted definitely is its own special, unique story about Ella, who lives in the country of Frel, and when she is a baby is gifted, I'm using air quotes because she is gifted obedience, which means whenever anyone tells her to do anything, she is it's impossible for her not to obey. And so I really love the pacing in this story, and you just get lots of different aspects. There's so much character development with Ella, but also the prince. He and Ella are friends first, and I love that so much. And you also get to know the stepsisters fairly well, maybe more than you want to. And eventually they go off to boarding school. So there's a fun, so many of us here on BookTube love boarding school elements in books. And I really enjoy that. And then, as if it couldn't get any better, then there's traveling on foot. And I love that in books. Getting to see the different landscape, meeting different characters and creatures along the way. So all in all, it's just such a fabulous, whimsical, lovely, creative interpretation of Ella Enchanted, and also has some humor in there. And I do really recommend the audiobook. I think it's, especially for children, a really great one that has musical interludes between chapters and different sound effects for when different scenes are happening, and it's just really spectacular. And then third on the list, which this is a bit of a looser retelling, but I'm counting it, is Nightingale Wood by Stella Gibbons. This one I would say is interesting too for me to call it, a Cinderella retelling, because the prince is not the most admirable of characters. He's a little bit flaky, and there are many points in the story when you're very frustrated by him. But what I love so much about this story is the humor in it. And I should backtrack. Nightingale Wood is about, and the character escapes me right now, so I'll just put it on the screen right there, who is recently widowed and has nowhere else to go. So she has to go live with her horrible in-laws who she can't stand. And this takes place in like 20s era England. So it's a really fun, unique setting. And she goes to work to try to make some money, but then meets this sort of society gentleman who she is totally not his equal in society, and just kind of falls head over heels in love with him. And there is a woman who is already pursuing him, so of course there's going to be lots of drama with that. And I think it's a really interesting and fun interpretation. Like I said, the humor is just so great in this, and the prince, not quite as ideal as in other books, but still interesting to read about nonetheless. Then another kind of loose interpretation would be Miss Pettigrew Lives for a Day. But I think something can almost count as Cinderella if it just simply is about kind of someone being riches to riches, or just rags to riches, and kind of an outcast to a certain extent. There's something about them that makes them stand out and considered not as high of a rank as other people, but just being plucky and really going against the grain and being true to themselves. I think that can kind of count as Cinderella. And then having this sort of magical experience where sort of lots of things are improved for them all of a sudden. And in Miss Pettigrew Lives for a Day, Miss Pettigrew is hired out by a temp agency as a nanny, but she gets accidentally sent to this woman who wanted a maid. And so this wealthy young woman, Miss LaFosse, kind of changes Miss Pettigrew's whole life just in a day. And it's really fun to see. It's very fast-paced, larger-than-life plot, and just really keeps you on the edge of your seat. And I just think a real treat to read. And then lastly, a YA pick is Cinder by Marissa Meyer. And this is the first in her Lunar Chronicles series. And I think it was the first year I was on BookTube, I read the Lunar Chronicles and absolutely loved them. I kind of found out, I actually do like some YA fantasy. And these are science fiction fairy tale retellings. And so the first, Cinder, is of course Cinderella. And what makes Cinderella an outcast in this storyline is that she is part cyborg. And so, the prince is falling in love with her, but she really doesn't want him to know because she thinks he will reject her if he knows more about who she really is. But it's such a unique take on it. It's a dystopian setting in New Beijing, and there is a really wicked, wicked queen who makes for a really intense, awesome villain. And I just think it was a really interesting, fast-paced plot, and just such a different take on it that I just got swept away by the world. I really loved how different of an interpretation it was. In addition to that, I do think there is a fair amount of character development with the stepsisters and just all of the characters. I really appreciated the character development in this. So those are my 5 recommendations. I can't wait to do more videos for this project and to get, totally started and up and running with it. Please let me know if you do have any film, picture book, or novel recommendations for me, and I will try out pretty much anything. And I will see you guys for the next video in the Cinderella Chronicles soon. Bye.